Hello, saints and scholars. Welcome back to Theolife, where we are going to look at objections to the teleological argument. We're having too much fun to be learning. I personally think the evidence for the teleological argument is absolutely fascinating and definitely points to God. But I've kind of heard a rumor, you might have noticed there are some people out there that think, no, this isn't actually a valid argument. For more information, check out the comments below. Let's examine the 7 most common objections to the teleological argument. Argument number 1 would be evolution. We don't need a Christian explanation to explain how life came about on the planet. We already know that the process of evolution shows us how life came about on the planet purely through naturalistic means. Through the theory of survival of the fittest, we can clearly see that how life developed on this planet. To which you may respond, this argument misunderstands evolution. Evolution shows us how life can come from a single-celled organism to a more complicated organism. But that doesn't show us how life began, that shows us how life changes. Your theory starts with an irreducibly complex self-propagating life form that changes after multiple generations. Yet the teleological argument asks what happens before you get to the cell. How did we get from nothing to an irreducibly complex self-propagating life form? Let's imagine you were debating the existence of aeroplanes, and you said you could explain the existence of aeroplanes as long as you began with the assumption that there are already simple aeroplanes and aeroplane-producing factories existing in the world. That's a lot of assumptions baked into your argument before you even begin to make it. Yet cosmology asks what happened before we even got to that place. The next objection would be the theory of the multiverse. Yes, we live in a very intricate universe, but how do we know this is the only universe? Maybe there are trillions of billions of universes being created all of the time, and out of these trillions and billions of universes, it makes sense that one of them would come together that would be capable of sustaining life. Our universe might not be special, it might just be lucky of all of the universes that were created. To which you may respond, the multiverse didn't just ruin Marvel movies, it's actually bad science. There is no evidence that the multiverse exists. Now you might argue that's because we can't see anything outside of our universe, but that doesn't invalidate the point. When performing an investigation, we have to work with the information we have, not potential information that we theorize could possibly exist. Without evidence of other universes, we cannot come to the determination that the multiverse is a real thing. Therefore, based on the only universe we know to exist, we have to extrapolate what happened that this universe is so beautifully fine-tuned. Third, let's look at errors in design. If God is so good and so intelligent, how come there's so many problems with the universe? Human beings are born with genetic mutations all the time. Our bodies may be incredible, but they do have multiple flaws. Children in Africa are drinking water that have parasites that burrow into their eyes. How can you say there's a good, intelligent designer, but there's a world with so many problems? Now, you may be tempted at this point to argue that we live in a fallen world, and because of this fallenness, nature is inherently broken. Yet I would avoid making this argument. First, the argument has very limited biblical support. It requires you to extrapolate huge amounts of theology from very few biblical verses. Secondly, because it is a doctrinal argument, you're making a theological case rather than something from shared experiences. The cosmological argument is not really a theological argument. It's rather looking at the physical observable universe and determining information from that. So it's usually best to avoid shaky biblical arguments at this time. A better response might be, let's try to break your argument down into a syllogism. Premise 1, God is supposed to have created the universe. Premise 2, the universe has many features that cause suffering. Conclusion, therefore, God does not exist. As you can see, the conclusion does not follow from the premise. Your argument appears to be with the character of God rather than the existence of God. You may say you look at the universe, conclude that God created it, but you don't like the universe, therefore you do not like God. That's a different argument than whether or not God exists. The cosmological argument does not make an argument about the character of God, rather the existence of God. Therefore, this argument would not refute the cosmological argument. Another interesting theory for the existence of life on Earth could be that a higher species of alien intentionally planted it upon Earth and created the universe.
Now, this sounds absolutely insane, and I'm aware of how this sounds, but
it's entirely possible that life came to Earth traveling from outer space. Possibly another planet with life upon it had a meteor that came down to Earth with cells living upon it. It may also be possible that aliens put life on this planet on purpose. This theory is known as panspermia and could explain the existence for how life came upon planet Earth. As previously noted, the great order of the universe has led some to conclude that we could be living in a simulation created by higher beings. Could it be that an alien life form created this simulation or the order of the universe in which we presently live? This would explain why the universe is orderly and where life came from. To which you may respond, the first problem with the alien hypothesis is it's merely kicking the can down the road. If aliens did create the universe or life on the universe, then those aliens would themselves need to have a cause or a mover and would be contingent beings. And since we cannot have an infinite regress, we would just need another line in the explanation of what created those aliens. Now, if these aliens existed outside of our system of time and causality, then we would just be comparing their powers to a god. If the aliens were an unmoved mover and an uncaused cause, an uncontingent being, and lived outside of time, then you would just be taking the word God and replacing it with alien, but making it sound more scientific. The next most common argument would be called the God of the Gaps. This argument is merely a God of the gaps. You're taking something that you don't understand and putting God in its place. You're taking gaps in our understanding or your own understanding and you're saying it's so complicated God must have done it. Like the ancients who didn't understand where lightning came from, so they created a God of thunder. You don't understand how creation came about, so you are asking God to fill in those gaps. Why not let scientific theories fill in those gaps for you to create a far better understanding? To which you may respond, this would be a straw man fallacy, as you're intentionally misrepresenting a theist argument. The theist is not arguing that the universe is incomprehensible, therefore God must have done it. The theist is arguing that every single day we see complexity, functionality, and purpose come about through intelligent minds. Be it mass-produced car factories or the intricate design of an anthill, intelligent minds create complexity, functionality, and purpose. Yet we do not see examples of inorganic material creating the exact same purpose. The cosmological argument is not arguing from a place of ignorance. It's arguing that all the information we have about how things are created fits within the framework of an intelligent being, and no evidence has ever shown us that intelligence can rise from inorganic material. The cosmological argument is based on what we do know as opposed to what we do not know. Some people argue against the teleological argument because they believe it is non-falsifiable. This is not a good argument because it's not falsifiable. We cannot go back to the beginning of the universe or the beginning of life on this planet. Because we can't see how they happened, it's not right to determine whether one theory is right or one theory is wrong. Neither theory can be proven false, therefore we shouldn't put too much weight on any of these ideas. To which you may respond, your argument actually can be falsified. As we've suggested, why not create an environment perfectly suited to the beginning of life? Put together every single element that will be necessary to come together to create even the most basic living organism, and do whatever process you deem necessary that could help encourage the development of a living organism. If through that process you could create a living organism, that would be the death blow to the teleological argument and the cosmological argument. You could easily falsify these beliefs with this complicated but doable experiment. Yet in the absence of these results, it is not the responsibility of the theist to change their beliefs. The theist has come to the conclusion based on what they have seen as opposed to what they have not seen. Finally, let's examine if there is evidence to show that life came about through a natural process. We actually have seen evidence of life beginning in the bottom of the ocean. We see examples of this on the ocean floor, where proteins wrap around one another, then join up to deep-sea thermal vents to get powered by hydrogen. It creates miniature cell membranes that can feed on the stuff coming out of these thermal vents and possibly creating the first living cells. We may not have a cell, but we have the beginning of a cell, where inside this sac we put all these lovely amino acids and proteins together to start to create a living being. This could be the first step in our understanding of how a cell is formed. To which you may respond, a cell membrane is actually way more complicated than you may think. The cell membrane is not merely a collection of protons, but rather a highly complicated biological system that is essential for the cell's survival. The cell membrane needs to be able to take in food for the cell, at the same time needs to be able to expel waste. It also needs to take in water within the cell, but not too much water, so it will not drown the cell. cell membrane needs to be able to detect things which can hurt the cell and things which will be food for the cell. This is a highly complicated process that could not come about by the mere random collection of protons. What has been created at the bottom of the ocean looks nothing like a cell membrane that in any way relates to anything we see today. As interesting as this process is, it doesn't look anything like life we see on Earth, and therefore can't be used to justify how life came into existence. Whew, isn't it great how both sides of my personality can still remain friends after having an argument? So did you find any of the arguments against the cosmological argument to be convincing? Or does this intelligent design still look like the most probable idea? Do let me know, because you decide.